Have you ever watched someone orchestrate their own downfall while thinking they were crafting the perfect revenge? I have. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like witnessing the moment when someone's carefully constructed plan crumbles into dust, revealing the broken pieces they've been trying to hide all along. I remember the day Jack invited Sarah to his wedding like it was yesterday. The memory is seared into my mind, not because of the invitation itself, but because of the hollow laugh that accompanied it, a sound that should have warned me about everything that was to come. We were sitting in his newly renovated kitchen, the granite countertop still gleaming with that fresh installed shine, when he pulled out the cream-colored envelope with a flourish that made my stomach turn. "Watch this, Mark," he said, his voice carrying that edge I'd grown to recognize whenever he spoke about Sarah. "This is going to be the greatest moment of my life." At first I thought he was joking. We all knew the history, the bitterness that had poisoned our friend group for years, the vicious back and forths that had turned casual dinners into minefields of conversation, the endless rants about how she had ruined his life. Jack had told us time and again that Sarah had been the one who broke his heart, the one who destroyed their marriage. He'd painted her as this calculating villain who had systematically dismantled their relationship, and naturally, we all believed him. Why wouldn't we? He was our friend, and we only saw one side of the story. But that invitation, that's what changed everything. I watched Jack grin like he'd just solved some complex puzzle, his eyes glittering with something that looked less like joy and more like desperation, masked as triumph. He wanted her there to witness what he called his greatest victory. He was about to marry Emma, this remarkably kind and patient woman who'd entered our circle just a few months prior. Emma, with her gentle smile and her way of smoothing over Jack's rough edges, seemed like everything Sarah wasn't. Or at least, everything Jack claimed Sarah wasn't. "It's perfect," he declared, running his fingers along the edge of the envelope. "She'll have to see how much better off I am now. She'll have to watch me be happy with someone else." He paused, taking a sip of his whiskey, the ice cubes clinking against the glass like tiny warning bells. "And the best part? She'll have to sit there and realize that she meant nothing, that she was replaceable." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. This wasn't about closure or healing or even moving on. This was about something darker, something that spoke of wounds that had never properly healed. Our friend group was split on the matter. Tom, always the optimist, suggested that maybe this could be a healing moment for everyone involved. "Maybe showing her you're doing well is exactly what you need to move on," he offered one night during our weekly poker game. But Jack's response, a sharp laugh and a dismissive wave, told us everything we needed to know about his true intentions. The months leading up to the wedding were like watching someone construct an elaborate trap, except the person most likely to be caught in it was the trapmaker himself. Jack became obsessed with the details, not of the wedding itself, but of how Sarah would perceive each element. The venue had to be grander than their wedding. The food had to be more expensive. The guest list had to be more exclusive. Every decision was filtered through the lens of how it would make Sarah feel inferior. Emma, sweet Emma, seemed oblivious to it all. Or maybe she wasn't, and that smile of hers just hid a deeper understanding of what she was walking into. Sometimes I caught her watching Jack during his rants about Sarah, her expression unreadable, and I wondered if she knew she was marrying a man who was still haunted by the ghost of his past relationship. The wedding day arrived with all the fanfare Jack had meticulously planned. The Sterling Hotel's grand ballroom was transformed into something out of a fairy tale, with crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across white roses and gilt-edged place cards. Emma was radiant in her designer gown, a vision in white that should have been the center of attention. Should have been. But Jack couldn't stop watching the door. When Sarah finally arrived, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. She walked in wearing a simple blue dress that somehow managed to look more elegant than half the designer outfits in the room. Her hair was different than I remembered, shorter, styled in loose waves that framed her face perfectly. She looked serene. That's the only word for it. like someone who had walked through a storm and emerged on the other side, completely at peace. Jack's reaction was immediate and visible. His smile became fixed, artificial, as he watched Sarah navigate the room with grace that seemed almost supernatural. She greeted old friends with genuine warmth, complimented Emma's dress with what appeared to be sincere admiration, and generally conducted herself like someone attending any other wedding, not like someone walking into an elaborate trap designed to humiliate them. The ceremony went smoothly, but the reception, that's when everything Jack had planned started to unravel. He had orchestrated what he thought would be the perfect public humiliation, a series of speeches that would subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, reference their failed marriage, highlighting how much better his life was now. The best man's speech was particularly cruel, filled with thinly veiled references to their past, and jokes that made several guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. What Jack hadn't counted on was Sarah's response. She stood up after the speeches, champagne glass in hand, and the room fell silent. I'll never forget the look on Jack's face, a mixture of triumph and terror, as if he couldn't decide whether this was exactly what he wanted or his worst nightmare coming true. "I'd like to say something if I may," Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. The silence in the room deepened. "First, congratulations to Emma and Jack. Marriage is a beautiful thing when it's built on the right foundation." She paused, letting those words sink in. "I know many of you here tonight have heard stories about me, about our past. You've probably formed opinions based on those stories, and that's natural. We all do that." Jack started to stand, but Emma's hand on his arm kept him in his seat. Sarah continued, "But what you might not know is that stories have many sides, and truth is rarely as simple as we'd like it to be. When I married Jack years ago, I loved him completely. I loved him through the late nights when he wouldn't come home, through the emotional walls he built, through the countless times he chose his pride over our connection. I loved him until loving him meant losing myself." The room was absolutely still. You could have heard a pin drop. "I didn't leave to destroy him, as some of you might have been led to believe. I left because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that's slowly destroying you. And yes, it hurt. Change always does. But healing is a choice we make every day." She turned to Emma then, her expression softening. "Emma, I wish you and Jack nothing but happiness. I truly do. And Jack, ... She looked at him directly for the first time that evening. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. Because it was never about winning or losing. It was about growing, learning, and becoming better people. I've made my peace with our past. I hope someday you can too." With that, she sat down. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack's face had lost all color, his carefully constructed narrative crumbling around him. In trying to showcase his triumph, he had instead revealed his deepest wounds to everyone in the room. Sarah hadn't just survived his attempt at humiliation, she had transformed it into a moment of truth that left him exposed. The rest of the reception carried on with a strange undercurrent of tension. Jack tried to maintain his composure, but the damage was done. His smile never quite reached his eyes again that night, and several times I caught him staring into space, looking lost in a way I'd never seen before. Sarah left shortly after her speech, but her presence lingered like a ghost in the room. She had done something remarkable. She had shown everyone that true strength isn't about revenge or proving someone wrong. It's about finding peace with your own truth and being able to speak it without malice. Years later, I still think about that night, about how Jack's attempt at revenge became a mirror that reflected his own unhealed wounds, about how Sarah's quiet dignity spoke volumes more than any carefully planned humiliation ever could, about how sometimes the people we think we've broken are actually the ones who have put themselves back together in ways we never could. If you're reading this and plotting your own revenge, remember Sarah's words that night. Remember that true victory isn't about making someone else feel small. It's about growing beyond the need for revenge at all. Because in the end, The person most hurt by revenge is often the one seeking it. And if you're wondering what happened after, well, Jack and Emma's marriage lasted barely 2 years. Sarah? She's running a successful therapy practice now, helping others find their way through similar storms. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well and helping others do the same.
What about you? Have you ever witnessed someone's carefully planned revenge backfire? Or better yet, have you ever found yourself choosing healing over hatred? Share your story in the comments below. Because maybe, just maybe, your experience could help someone else choose growth over revenge. Remember, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away, head held high, leaving the past where it belongs. The end isn't always about who won or lost. Sometimes it's about who found peace first.